helping people with visual representation of their results, of their ideas, providing cogent critiques of presentations and writing, really participating in the science of the lab as someone with a remarkable and creative eye and mind. So she's a really good citizen of the lab in the way that anyone is expected to be. None of that is actually her work in the lab. Her work in the lab, her main contribution is the process of an artist in the middle of what we do and the reactions of an artist to all the things that we do and the questions and the challenges that art has to offer for science.
So for me, when I get asked this, because people want to know what it's like interacting with what I see as my fellow lab mates, it's interesting to say that as an artist. I offer perspective on writing, how to construct arguments, moral support, an earnest ear and conversation with all comers, like I said, website development, perspective on how to describe complex work with clarity, and my services as, this is actually quite fun, as a guinea pig for lab members' attempts to describe their work to a non-scientist, which is nice because as I understand more, they can flub and I'll still get it, but I'll say, you might want to do that differently. And perhaps even more shockingly, I give occasional feedback on the actual science. In short, I'm part of the team even while my skill set's a little idiosyncratic. Though, as far as my work, as far as my actual practice as an artist, through my work drawing, through my work building models of my upcoming exhibitions, I model a lot of my work, writing for my own work, presenting my work in the lab meetings, as we all do, bringing artists in for discussion with the rest of the group, so it's not just me. And then offering riddles in the lab meetings in order to invite them into the way I think about composing work. I invite them into the process and the thought and the dialogue within not only my own work, but my field. So there have been some significant challenges, and those are interesting things to consider. There were actually a couple of weeks I realized in retrospect, having studied anthropology, that I actually put myself into culture shock, which I didn't think was possible, but it's at least confirmation that these really are two different cultures. I paradoxically couldn't wait to get back to the lab and also really, really wanted to hide out in my studio. And there were real cultural differences, physical limitations of the space. They've been very generous. Steve's been very generous with space, but there's still the sort of orienting oneself and making the practice work. The constant presence of people, which is very different than a solitary studio, and occasionally being at ideological loggerheads when we're trying to work through a problem, because we do fight of a flavor when we don't agree on things, and so it usually is a very productive thing, and we've gotten better at it. But I knew from the start that all of this would be part of the deal, and all of this was reflective as much about my own internal constraints as any constraints of the actual project or the actual space or the people. So hard stuff, debates, differences, practical challenges, they're real, they're significant, and they're productive parts of this practice, just as now social sculpture is being refigured to really embrace these complexities.
So I think we're running out of time. So we were going to talk a bit about significant sort of benefits or realizations from the collaboration already. Mm-hmm. Do you want to mention that briefly? And I think we should probably stop at that point.
Yes, that sounds good. Yep. This actually covers some of what our 5.5-hour conversation was on the way from Pittsburgh to here. Some of the things that we've been talking about lately are what we call now totemic form, and actually Rebecca's work is a really interesting way of informing this. I even think Arena and what she was discussing. And the idea that there are deep forms that we all resonate with in our fields. If we dig back far enough, we can find these forms, and the way they manifest in the actual field is different. Even the way that the field talk about them sometimes seem in conflict or in paradox, but we're actually looking at really similar things, really sort of deep forms from our understanding. So that's one thing that's come out of the discussion.
Yeah, so when an artist samples well from science and takes that sample and puts it into another context, it really works in that context because there's something totemic about it that transcends either context. Mm-hmm. The other thing, which has been a sort of an ongoing, in a way, clash, but really important discussion between the two of us, has been the role of rational thinking versus what I call irrational thinking in science and art, both are present in both. And I don't mean irrational, I mean irrational. In science, we're forced, it's part of the sort of the rules of science that you take an idea which at its inception is not formalized, and you put it into a rational form where you've reduced it to a statement, mathematical or in a language, which can then be particularized. The elements of it can be particularized. You can kick the tires on it. You can test it. The irrational part is just as important in science, but has been underemphasized. And those two ways of knowing have very different roles in science, in my view. Natalie and I don't quite agree on this at this point, but I'm personally convinced that there's something there about modes of thinking and the role of the rational versus the irrational, and the power of the irrational, which is underrepresented in science by the necessity of rationalization.
So the ongoing clash, the ongoing dialogue of having people into the lab, seeing how this thing plays out, watching the evolution of it, and now having you all as part of the conversation adds to the social sculpture in refiguring the way these fields work. And it's been a pleasure talking to you about this. Thank you very much.
Thanks.